Hi, I'm Brenda Hunt. I'm the Watershed Program Manager with the Carson Water Subconservancy District. And this is our third week of Watershed Wednesday Forum Series. And this one is focused on floodplain protection. We are going to have a panel, an interview panel, and I'm going to turn it over to Carlo Luri to moderate this session. Thank you, Carlo.
Thank you, Brenda. And my name is Carlo Luri. I work for the Bentley family here in the Carson Valley. We are a major landowner here. And so I've been asked to moderate the conversation with Alicia Reban from Nevada Land Trust and Juan Guzman, who wears multiple hats. And I will let both of them introduce themselves in a minute. Why don't we start with Alicia? Alicia, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the Nevada Land Trust?
Sure, Carlo, and thanks for helping moderate our session today. As mentioned, my name is Alicia Reban. I'm Executive Director of Nevada Land Trust. We are an independent, nationally accredited, sort of Nevada-based conservation nonprofit. We have been around about 22 years, and I'm one of the group of founders who completed close to 70 projects across Nevada, primarily here along the Sierra Front, protected over 60,000 acres of land and associated water rights.
So Alicia, can you explain to the layperson, what does protection of land, what does that really mean? How is Nevada Land Trust working to protect the floodplains, specifically here in the Carson River watershed?
We look at helping to protect areas with very high resource values, and floodplains are at the top of that list. So we bring all of our sort of land trust tools to that work. We will facilitate larger sort of community-based conservation initiatives. We've been doing that with KTMB and other partners on the Truckee River for about 5 years, and we're starting that work also.
KTMB is Keep Truckee
Meadows Beautiful. Yep. And bringing our sort of land protection hat to those conversations through any projects that NLT undertakes. We work very closely, never on our own, always in partnership first and foremost with landowners. So understanding what, say, a ranching family's vision is for their working lands, what a community wants in terms of their trails or access areas. And we create a protection effort, a conservation effort around those factors. So each project is different, is the point I'm trying to make. And two examples of floodplain work. One is as a close partner of Carson City. We worked to acquire the property known as Carson River Canyon, which includes about 3 miles of river frontage there in the floodplain off of Deer Run Road. 400 or so acres with Carson City. And again, kind of facilitate things, bring a project toward close, help secure additional funding if necessary for a project from a variety of sources, some of which, folks have already heard about in recent recordings, but come up with that individual prescription, if you will, on how to protect those lands best. Other projects involve conservation easements, which you've also heard about, and we see that a lot with ranching families who want to be able to continue their agricultural operations. And then Nevada Land Trust, typically but not always, is in a position to hold those easements long term. We search for the funding necessary to do that. Again, we're in there in that space, kind of with the landowner, building partnerships, helping to bring the funding to the table from these local, state, and federal programs, and seeing everything through to close. So every project is different, and floodplains are have such high priority for NLT.
So I have so many questions for you, but for example, what's in it for a private landowner? What would motivate them to work with you?
They would be motivated to work with us because of perhaps our track record, our experience at figuring out sort of that tailor-made approach for each property. You know, it all starts with that communication with the landowner. So really, what is your goal for this land? What is your vision? 10 years, 20 years, 100 years even. When we're doing conservation easements, those are in perpetuity, which is a very long time. So we really have to build that relationship and, you know, seek first to understand the wishes of that landowner. We look at the resource values on a particular property, which kind of can point us in the direction of funding sources. I think landowners come to us because of that experience. Having somebody to put together those funding nominations and actually help push that project toward closing, kind of taking care of all the real estate issues, making sure the title is ready, making sure that you know, if survey work needs to be done, that's been done. Just really facilitating and being there throughout the process, you know, step by step, hand in hand, toward this mutual goal. So I think people like working with us, landowners like working with us, because we can figure out how to navigate, I think, that process fairly well.
So from a practical standpoint, let's say I'm the landowner, what does it mean to have a conservation easement on my property? What am I giving up? What am I allowed to do? Just kind of to general question.
You are essentially giving up the development rights from that piece of property, and you are either selling those or possibly gifting those, or a combination of both, to a conservation partner for safekeeping. And that could be a nonprofit conservation organization like Nevada Land Trust, like Nature Conservancy. It could be a local government, Douglas County, Carson City. It could be state or federal government entity. So that's the holder of the easement. As a landowner, you can expect that through those early conversations, a plan is developed that finds that sort of sweet spot between protecting the resource values and kind of the agricultural operations, for example, on a ranch, of back to that vision of what you see for the property in the long term. So the underlying property stays in private ownership, and really there is what better manager of that property than the folks who've been doing it for a very long time. So that partnership is particularly important, but you can expect that the holder of the easement We'll be in communication on a somewhat regular basis, that there will be an annual monitoring trip out to the property. So the bottom line for the holder of a conservation easement, it is a promise to enforce the terms of the easement forever. And rarely, and conservation easements have been around elsewhere in the country close to 100 years. Usually issues don't arise until subsequent landowners, because when you sell a property with a conservation easement on it, conservation easement stays with the property. And so the holder of the easement needs to talk with the new landowners, make sure they understand things that, as part of that original vision, are allowed or prohibited. One example might be if we want to do a little bit of riparian restoration, we might work together in the beginning to provide some alternate water for cattle so that we can stabilize a riverbank. That's just one example. It's all through conversation, all through the relationship on what will be successful on a particular property. So we're just partners forever.
So if I understand correctly, if I'm the landowner, I still own the land.
Yes.
And I can still farm and ranch on the land.
Yes.
And I can also sell the land subject to the conservation easement.
Right.
So that sounds like a pretty good deal. And I'm assuming that that typically the landowner gets compensated in some way for selling those rights.
Yes, that's correct.
Great.
That's correct.
Let's jump over to Juan. Juan, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your multiple affiliations as citizen volunteer extraordinaire, and tell us about your past life pre-retirement?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carlo. And thank you for having this opportunity to talk to our listeners about conservation and flood issues and how they relate. I am Juan Guzman. I work as a planner throughout most of my adult life in different places, San Bernardino County and Mono County out of Bridgeport, Douglas County, where I reside, and finally in Carson City. In Carson City, as a planner, I became senior planner and was involved with large developments for the most part. And one day I woke up and kept feeling I just keep contributing to development. And my little contribution to preserve land and environmental aspects of the community has to do with perhaps a planned unit development and setting aside a little bit of ground for recreation. Then an opportunity came in 1996. Carson City passed a sales tax, and that sales tax was going to be used exclusively for the purchase and management of open space and for the improvement of certain recreation facilities. With that opportunity, I told my wife, I want to do that. I want to manage that program. And she looked at me and says, she's crazy. You are, very high in your career and you want to go back and start something new that you don't know anything about. And I looked at her and told her, well, don't worry. Alicia and Reban have promised that she will help me, among other people. And this is really what I want to do. This is what I think what I want to learn. I am tired of, again, being an instrument to help development and want to try to preserve land. So then for the next 14 years, it was the most extraordinary job in the world. I was managing the fund to buy lands, use it for conservation and recreation. A whole bunch of the land we purchased was along the Carson River. And then we traded lands with the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management so that we can consolidate our ownerships of lands along the Carson River. those lands are just precious because of the flood zone. One of the typical sayings of the Board of County Commissioners was, we don't want to do what had happened in the Truckee Meadows. We don't want to follow that example. We don't want to let development encroach on floodlands and then have to come back and mitigate at very expensive price those land uses. We want to go ahead and preserve those lands for recreation, for agricultural uses, and just let the river flow and do the things, let the natural processes take over. So that was a great mandate. That was how I spent my free time. When I retired, I felt that many of the relationships I have built with federal agencies, with other nonprofits, with private landowners, were going to go by the wayside if I didn't find a vehicle to use them. So there comes Carson Valley Trails Association and Muscle Powered. Carson Valley Trails Association is a nonprofit operating in the Carson Valley, mostly out of Genoa, but we operate in the whole valley. And Carlo, you're a member of the association as well. You're a board member. So
we heard about recreation last week. So for anybody who missed last week's, they should go back and watch the recordings. But yeah, last week was all about recreation in the watershed. So that was a great topic.
Yes, and we have the opportunity to in detail discuss the work of Muscle Power, the historic V&T, as well as the work of Carson Valley Trails. And so what I was telling you is that I just became board member of both Muscle Power and Carson City to try to put to use all that knowledge or experience and try to continue the work of conservation from the sidelines. I still volunteer with Carson City Open Space Program and talk to their staff all the time. Muscle Power have a very robust relationship with the Carson City Open Space Program.
So speaking of your volunteer activities, I know that last year you worked with a group here in Douglas County to get question 3 on the ballot in November. So can you tell us a little bit about question 3, and which of course it narrowly missed passing, but can you tell us a little bit about it, and if it had passed, how would it have helped with land conservation in Douglas County?
Yes, there is a statute under Nevada law that allows counties to form a group that will utilize sales tax in order to preserve land. The land preserved can be used for agricultural purposes and can be used for recreation. The statute also defines what open space means, it specifically and very emphatically provides that the monies generated out of that sales tax can only be used for that purpose. It's not that you can go back and fix roads, or you cannot go back and hire a new employee to do taxes, or hire a new employee to do any other function other than specifically managing the open space or managing the lands that you have protected. Here in the Carson Valley, it became obvious to the group working on this measure that it was initiated by the Douglas County Planning Commission. And the purpose was to try to acquire conservation easements. And then conservation easements, Alicia talked about it already, so I won't spend a whole bunch of time talking more about it, other than to say that we wanted the opportunity to help family in ranching and family pursuing agricultural lands to be able to remain in agriculture, as opposed to having to sell land for development. And we felt that a conservation easement was one more tool, and the legislature that the program offered under the legislation was really good in order to develop that. Like you mentioned, unfortunately, it did not pass. The program in Carson City was a little different because it wasn't based on state law. It was created on a law that was drafted specifically for Carson City. And it included recreation from day one, as well as conservation easements, as well as buying land by the city and the city managing that land. In Douglas County, it was more managing purchasing conservation easements so that the land would remain in private hands, being used for hopefully ranching purposes. And then the way it relates is, as you know, most of those lands are situated in really close proximity to the river because of irrigation, because of water needed to grow crops. So therefore, by preserving those ranch, you are at the same time protecting the flood and protecting the floodways and making able that the river has a natural process, a natural way to go.
So a conservation question has been on the ballot before, and again, it was on last year. It only failed by about 1,000 votes or so. What do you think the challenges were? Why do you think it didn't pass? Everybody seems in favor of preserving the open spaces in Douglas County, but why do you think the voters are not willing to pay for it?
Yeah, it was interesting. Part of our main task was to explain to the voters, number one, that the paying for a sales tax to be able to purchase conservation easements and preserve land was worth it. We calculated based on tables from the IRS and the state tax office that it will cost a family no more than $13 just per individual a year to be able to save tax. And that was a family, you know, of medium income. So we spent great amount of time trying to bring that fact forward by talking to social clubs and by having direct mailings and by having also the opportunity to discuss it in forums with whoever we want. We prepared presentations and we distributed those presentations and were handed out. I believe that, and this is my personal belief, that in Douglas County, there's the ethos and the thinking of no additional taxes is really strong. So any program that relies on taxes is very difficult to be able to bring forward. However, much to my surprise and just it was positive that even our leaders, our county commissioners, the planning commissioners, our government leaders felt specifically that putting this question in front of the voters was a valuable exercise, and not only valuable, it was important to do. Many of our, the Farmers Bureau, the towns, a whole bunch of districts came in favor of this measure because they see the pressure that economic development is putting on farmers to sell the lands. So adding one more program was incredibly important, and we are not going back. We hope that to bring the question back, and as a matter of fact, we are having negotiations or we're having discussions to partner with the Nevada Land Trust in order to be able to do more services and serve as a local sounding board for their projects and trying to advance their projects.
So it's a shame that the sales tax initiative did not pass on question 3. But I'll just open this question up to both you, Juan, and Alicia. So maybe you can both of you talk a little bit about what programs are available, what the funding sources are for the purchase of conservation easements. I know people have probably heard the acronym SNPLMA. It's a hard one to say, and
Right.
most people just have heard the acronym but don't know exactly what it means. But what programs are available, and maybe in closing, just talk a little bit about what projects that you know about that are currently under consideration, if it's okay to talk about them for land protection here in the Carson Valley.
Sure. Let me just add one thing. Looking at recent results from a Colorado college poll across the West, interviewed Nevadans, so statistically valid survey, 90% of Nevadans want the state to continue investing in conservation. So it's their Conservation in the West poll, if anybody wants some more information. But you had asked about the various funding sources that are available for protection in the floodplains. Certainly Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act, or SNPLMA, is one source of funds. That comes from the sale of public lands within a boundary in Clark County. And those proceeds from the sale of these various federal lands within this boundary are used for a variety of things, including a portion going to purchase of environmentally sensitive lands elsewhere in the state. So SNPLMA has been a valuable source of funds for Douglas County. A more recent example is our work with the Conservation Fund on the Jacks Valley Ranch, which is now protected by a conservation easement through the U.S. Forest Service.
Alicia?
Yes.
I wanted to also mention that one of the issues with the Southern Nevada funds specifically is that a city or a county needs to be admitted into the legislation. Carson City was as part of the lands bill, the federal lands bill. And as part of the Douglas County lands bill, that is also one of the expected benefits of it, to be able to participate. Then on the other hand, both the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service have the ability to move projects that they believe will enhance both their goals and county goals.
Right.
And that's one of the ways that we have used in Douglas County to be able to take advantage of Southern Nevada funds.
Good point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, the next big source, I think, is the Resource Conservation Service. And those are really good grants, and a whole bunch of money is not used and goes back to Washington, D.C.
Right.
And it's a shame that we cannot take more advantage of those. From my experience, is pretty scientifically based. So you need to have somebody, a facilitator, like Land Trust, that knows the ins and out of the program and the goals, and can talk very specific, in very specific scientific goals, and develop objectives for a specific piece of ground or piece of property. But the sourcing, the fund sources are just incredibly good.
And the source for the NRCS programs, really it's the Farm Bill through the USDA, and they have the Agricultural Land Easement Program, which I know Jessica discussed, and also the Wetland Reserve program. Both have different match requirements. So it's rare that one funding source funds 100% of an acquisition of fee title land, so the entire parcel with water, or the conservation easement. So you have to come up sometimes with 50% match or 75% match, depending on the program, location. You know, there are, Juan already talked about the Carson City's open space program. We've got some active projects right now in Sierra Front in the Carson watershed, awaiting a decision in the Forest Legacy program. So that is, the source is a Forest Service funding that comes through the Nevada Division of Forestry. And is concerned very much with forest health. So you tend to see that up in the higher reaches of the watershed. Go ahead.
Alicia, I wanted to interrupt you and also mention specifically about that program, that it has two aspects. It has one source of funding that tries to obtain lands up in rural settings, different from the settings also, I believe they call it urban parks, and it's lands that are adjacent to cities or development and need to be preserved. So again, it's another fantastic source of programs and funding. You just need someone who knows the program to
right.
help you out through the process.
Land and Water Conservation Fund. Sorry.
I was going to say, this is such a complex and interesting topic. I'm sure we could probably chat for hours about this.
We have spreadsheets.
I know we're coming up on about a half an hour, which was the time for our talk. But Alicia, if a landowner is interested in learning more, are there any resources? Where would they go? How do they start? Would they call you up first, or is there a place where they can go and do some research on their own?
Well, there are certainly some excellent resources out there for landowners. Nevada Land Trust has recently updated our website at nevadalandtrust.org. There is a section specifically for landowners, and then invite anytime a call just to talk quietly. You know, we don't, as I mentioned, sort of at the front end, you know, that relationship with the landowner is sort of primary in importance, and we can speak off the record if necessary, just to kind of get oriented and pointed in the right direction in terms of what might work best or what to explore first. And Nevada Land Trust is at 775-851-5180. And you're welcome to ask for me or for Renee.
And I wanted to add, Alicia and Carlo, that in my mind, the ranchers are really, for the most part, they're really close-knit community, and they know each other, and they meet pretty often, and they discuss their, you know, what things are new. So within our valley, there are quite a few conservation easements. The Guzman's, Barbara Byington, and the Gillespie Ranch has one. Ranch Juan in Genoa is a great example of a ranch that uses land preserved by the Nature Conservancy, additional land to graze, and they also exchange ideas and water irrigation practices, and it's just a really good example where that reluctance of having an outsider help you in your business has been overcome, and now they're great partners. And you could just need to ask J.B. Lukenberry, and he will say so without any hesitation, which is great. So that's another source. And also the if you just go to the NRCS website, you will be able to find information about conservation easements in general. This is the thing. It can be overwhelming. So please don't let that scare you and try to contact Alicia in this case or somebody else that you trust with confidence, and you will get help.
Well, great. I want to thank, oh, sorry, go ahead, Alicia.
And so that's, to Juan's last point, it can be complicated, it can be overwhelming, but, finding a partner that you can trust to help guide and support through it, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Great. Well, I wanted to close by saying thank you to both of you for participating today, and also thank you for all that you have done and will do in the future to help protect our valley and our watershed. It's just a beautiful area, and the open spaces here in the Carson Valley are really something to be cherished and treasured. And of course, we all know the value of protecting the watershed as well. So thank you to both of you for everything that you do. And thanks again for tuning in to our viewers. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.